So far this semester, we've had many opportunities to see how the tapestry of church history has intersected with threads from its context. We've seen the Constantinian symbiosis and its impact on the church in the early centuries. And today we're going to look and see how medieval politics influences the church in the medieval era up to the Crusades. Let's talk first about the Merovingian kingdom. All right, what is that? We've talked about Clovis, the Frankish prince, several times. But this is the first time that I've had occasion to mention that he descended from Merovius, and so the kingdom that Clovis established in what is now France is referred to as the Merovingian kingdom. Now, he married Clotilda, a Burgundian Catholic princess. We've talked about that also. And in 496, because of the influence of his wife, he converted and he united the Catholic citizens of his kingdom against the Germanic tribes and those who had brought Arianism into the West. And so he's unifying and strengthening the Catholic religion in his kingdom. He extended his kingdom over Gaul, Burgundy, and Bavaria, so largely what is now France and Germany. He and his descendants were benefactors to the Catholic Church and especially to the Roman papacy. All right, so again we see the Pope hanging his hat, hitching his wagon to the star of a political leader. Now, the Merovingian kingdom declined because of the kings that followed Clovis and his descendants were not as successful, as efficient as Clovis. And so, as the kings declined in their effectiveness, the leadership of the kingdom fell to a group that took on the title the mayor of the palace. It seems to me like this would be a prime minister, and yet this position also was a dynasty. It was passed on through generations of inheritance. The nearest example I can think of is the story of Gondor and how the Numenorian line of kings failed and the stewards took over to rule Gondor, obviously represented by Denethor, the great steward of Gondor at the time of the Lord of the Rings. All right, so do you get the picture now? The mayor of the palace has the true power and leadership in the Merovingian kingdom, which is going to continue its decline. So, during this period of decline, invasions swept Europe in the 7th and 8th centuries. Slavs from the east, Moors from Spain. And because of the decline of the kingdom, the church also declined. Education declined, was obliterated under barbaric domination. And so we see that secular rulers, the Merovingian kings, the mayors of the palace, they were the ones who appointed the bishops, the leaders of the church. And as a result, we have the development of simony and secularism. Secularism means the direct influence of the secular, that is the worldly leadership upon the leadership of the church, because they were the ones who appointed these influential church leaders. Simony is a term that we will use many times in our study of the medieval church. It means that a church position was a lucrative position. A person who was a bishop received the funds from the churches under his authority. Now you'll remember Gregory the First, the Bishop of Rome, used that authority wisely and justly to distribute those funds to those in need. But I told you that in the future we would see these ecclesiastical leaders that were greedy and would keep those funds for themselves. This is what we see taking place during the decline of the Merovingian kingdom, but we're going to see this pretty steadily through the remainder of the medieval church. And so, because a church position was potentially a lucrative position, individuals would offer to buy that position in order to be in a place to receive those funds. And so we call this simony, the practice of buying and selling church positions. Where did this term come from? Think about the book of Acts, chapter 8, and you'll think of Simon Magus, who was the pagan who was converted to Christianity. And when he saw Simon Peter coming and laying hands on new believers and they received the Holy Spirit, he said, "Give me that power. I will pay money for it." And Simon Peter said, "Away with you and your money." All right, but later on, the church is going to say, "Oh, bring that money on. We will receive it and sell you this position." All right, so you see another opportunity for corruption in the church. All right, now we're going to begin to see a resurgence in the kingdom in France as the Merovingian dynasty continues to decline, but the dynasty of the mayors are going to increase. And so we see Pepin the First. He died in 714. Pepin the First was a mayor with increased power. His son, Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer, is the one we've already talked about, who halted the Muslim advance into France at the Battle of Tours. So we see how Pepin's son, his dynasty, is going to become the savior of the kingdom. And finally, Pepin the Short is simply going to usurp the crown because the king is ineffective. In fact, they call him Kilderic the Stupid. Bless his heart. How would you like to go down into history as Kilderic the Stupid? All right. And so now Pepin the Short has taken the crown and he has become the king of the Frankish kingdom. And he was anointed king by Bishop Boniface. We've talked about him, the great missionary who came from England to evangelize this region of Germany and France. And he acted on the orders of Pope Zacharias. So Pope Zacharias took this opportunity to have his representative anoint King Pepin. This validated Pepin's kingship and gave the approval of the church to this usurpation of the crown. And in return, Pepin then rid the kingdom of paganism. He awarded land and authority to the Pope, and he ran the Lombards out of Italy. You remember the Lombards have harassed Italy, and particularly the church, for over 200 years. And it is Pepin the Short who finally rids Italy of the Lombards and keeps the Pope and his land and his kingdom safe. All right. The offspring of Pepin the Short is Charles the Great. We call him Charlemagne. And he is going to be the great leader of a new kingdom that's referred to as the Carolingian kingdom, named after himself, Charles. It's interesting, his father was Pepin the Short. Charles was 7 feet tall. All right, so maybe a mutant, I don't know. But nonetheless, he was a great man in stature as well as in success. So he extended the kingdom into an empire from the Pyrenees that border Spain all the way to the Danube in Germany, from the Danish border in the north to the south of Rome. And on Christmas Day, 800, the Pope, Leo III, crowned Charles as the emperor. And this became the birth of the Holy Roman Empire. Again, the Pope Leo is giving the blessing of the church to Charlemagne, which will further unite the church and the state. And this is an important moment in church history. Remember, this is the moment that brings the early period of the medieval era to a conclusion, and then brings about the beginning of the middle period, or the high Middle Ages. All right, because for centuries, Western Europe has been without any central political leadership. And so the Carolingian kingdom is a blessing in terms of bringing stability and some affluence in the area. And the Pope, of course, wants to connect with this kind of power and stability. What took place was on Christmas Day, Charlemagne went to the cathedral in Aachen, a great cathedral, and knelt at the altar in prayer. And as he stood up, Leo conveniently was standing there to put the crown on his head. Otherwise, he'd have had to get a step stool for this 7 foot tall monarch. But historians are not certain that Charlemagne expected or even wanted this sign of approval from the church, but nonetheless, he took advantage of it and used the church as a cement for his empire, as had done Constantine and Theodosius and others before him. This is a map of the Frankish Holy Roman Empire. Often it is joked that it was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. Certainly it did not extend, it only extended to a fraction of what the Roman Empire had been. But nonetheless, the Holy Roman Empire will be a force in medieval history. We'll refer to the empire and the emperor during many of our lectures to come. But you see that the Mohammedans are in the lower left. They still occupy Spain, but the green area is the Frankish Empire. Remember this purple in the South Italy connects it to the Byzantine Empire in the east. Remember that Justinian and his general Belisarius took over that area, and so they still have that presence there. In the north, we have the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in England. To the east, we have the Slavs, the Avars, and the Bulgars. These are tribes in the east. Notice this kind of golden colored strip of land called the Papal State. This is the state that the Pope claims is his territory. There was a legal document. Turns out it was forged, called the Donation of Constantine, which gave control of this territory to the Pope. And so this little slice of the papal state comes out of the Holy Roman Empire. All right, so here's a map, gives you an idea of the control that Charlemagne had. Now, the Holy Roman Empire brought about the ideal of a unified Christian society in Western Europe. The church and state were partners. And so the church was able to reform itself according to Latin patterns. That is, what the Roman church expected and enforced became the pattern of churches in the Holy Roman Empire. Benedictine monasticism was the rule of the day, if you'll pardon the pun. And tax support provided the creation of cathedral schools. This was important. It made education more widely available only to the noble and the rich, to be sure, but nonetheless, it was good to have education available even to a select few in the kingdom. So this brought about what we call a Carolingian Renaissance, a renewal of learning and culture. Now, Charlemagne died in 814, and as a result, the empire was divided among his three sons into three kingdoms. Well, of course, you divide and conquer, and new invasions led to the disintegration of the Holy Roman Empire, until there was a resurgence under a new dynasty of Saxons. Henry, known as the Fowler, founded the Saxon line in 919, and it lasted for a century. The chief monarch of the Saxon line was Otto I, known as Otto the Great. And you can see that his decades of rule dominate the Saxon dynasty. He was crowned emperor by Pope John XII. More about that later. And Otto and his armies defeated invading barbarians. He allied himself with the church and took it upon himself to appoint bishops and abbots. He gave them land. He received their support. All right, let's shift our attention to England in the 8th to 11th centuries. We'll look at Anglo-Saxon rule. If you will recall, we've already looked at a map of invading barbaric tribes, and I pointed out that Anglos and Saxons invaded England. So they united with each other and developed what we call the Anglo-Saxon tribe of people, and they ruled in England. Alfred the Great, all right, you can always tell who made a difference as king when they are given the honorific the Great. He ruled for 28 years in the 9th century. He defeated the Danish Vikings, pushed them out, unified England. He promoted education, monastic reforms, and he reorganized the church. Now, he had a number of capable successors for another century or so, but the Vikings came back. The Danish king Canute conquered England in 1016, but the Danish power disintegrated after his death. And then afterward, there's one great leader of note, Edward the Confessor. You see his dates of rule, 1042 to 1066. He was the last of Alfred's line. He was the last of the great Saxon rulers, because in 1066, William the Conqueror invaded England. And there's a reason why he's known as the Conqueror, because he invaded and conquered. So the Duke of Normandy brought Norman rule to England, and so it's no longer Anglo-Saxon England. Now it is Norman England. And William was supported by Pope Alexander II. The Pope hitched his wagon to William the Conqueror. He made the right choice. And so again, we have the union of church and state as the leader of the church sets his seal of approval on the new king, William. This set the stage for conflicts between the native Saxons and the occupying Normans. We see this as a background to the stories of Robin Hood and Ivanhoe, and then feudalism became a governmental force in England, as it had already taken over as a governmental policy in Europe. I'm going to just take a pause right here. We've looked historically at a number of kingdoms and kings and medieval politics through several centuries, but we will take a pause and then pick up right here and look at feudalism, define it, and we'll see how it impacted the medieval church during this era. All right, so join me in just a little bit as we return to our discussion of medieval politics and give a close look to the policies of feudalism.